Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. Your hosts are Patrick and Kathryn Andries.
Join us each week as we explore a wide range of metaphysical topics such as dreams, astrology, intuitive readings, and life purpose. You'll receive practical guidance so that you can live your most awesome life.
Learn more about what we do at intuitiveschool.com and connect with us on Facebook at Spirit's Journey Radio. Welcome to Spirit's Journey, coming to you live on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. You can also find us on iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and TalkStream Live. We are here in the Heartland holding the energy for spiritual truth and awareness. I'm Patrick.
I'm Kathryn, everyone. Welcome. So, in life, sometimes you just feel destined to meet certain people. And when you meet them, you feel like you've known them your whole life. Well, I kind of feel that way about our guest today. KC Bushnell is the president of the Light Center out in Baldwin City. And so when I stumbled upon the Light Center and met her, it was like, oh, I feel like I've known you before. And I just actually, even after knowing her for several years, as I was preparing her bio, I learned a couple new things about her that I didn't know. KC is the president, as I said, of the board at the Light Center out in Baldwin City. In addition to that, she attended the Wellness Institute in Washington State, where she has an advanced clinical therapy certificate. She learned heart-centered breath work. We're going to talk about that. She learned heart-centered hypnotherapy. She is also a Pilates instructor. I mean, talk about a jack of all trades. She has her own studio in Lawrence, Kansas called Personal Power Healing Arts Studio. And she received her certificate in Pilates in 1999, graduated from KU with a bachelor's in psychology. So we have a ton to talk about. Welcome, KC.
Hi, KC.
Hi, guys. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Well, I've been dying to
have you.
We've been dying to have somebody on to talk about breath work, which is just an amazing tool for healing. So we're so grateful that you could be here today. And so you have an interesting healing journey that I wanted to start off with so that people can kind of get a feel of, what got you into all these cool things. So tell us a little about that journey.
Okay, well, I started taking Pilates when I was 15 from a dance background, and I became certified in it, decided that I wanted to teach it after a car accident where I broke my femur. And through Pilates, I met a lot of really cool people and had a lot of really cool opportunities. I moved up here to Lawrence, Kansas to go to KU and opened my own Pilates studio. Interestingly enough, 6 months after I opened my Pilates studio, I went to inpatient treatment for alcohol addiction. And the treatment that I went to was one of the better places to go here in the country. However, it didn't keep me sober. And I relapsed 3 months after I got out. And so for the next 6.5 years, I struggled with my alcoholism and knew that something needed to be different in the treatment modality of any sort of addiction. I went through two other treatment programs and still didn't have any luck. And I started discovering spiritual methods and self-help methods. And I finally decided that I had enough with alcohol and went to treatment and stayed sober for good. And in that process, I began delving deeper and deeper into other ways of treating addictions, which I was able to meet wonderful people through my Pilates studio at the time, which has evolved into a healing art studio where I do the breath work and hypnotherapy, like you mentioned.
And KC, one of the interesting things you taught me that I didn't know is what is the failure rate of people that go through typical treatment centers for alcoholism?
Roughly 95 to 98%.
Yeah, that completely blew me away. I mean, I was like, oh my God, these places are useless. Like, why don't they get on track?
Right. Yeah, it's, I think they have, there's that possible, 2% success rate, which before 12-step programs, before AA came around, there was no success rate in the treatment of addictions. And so, I believe that our society has really grasped onto, well, we found something that helps people. And it's ended up helping millions and millions of people.
And so does it not work because is it all like, of course, I haven't been to a treatment center, but is it all just like talking about the problem and talking people through it?
Yes, there's a lot of mental work that goes into treatment centers. So they teach you a lot and you talk a little bit. And there's a lot of people that have had enough, and so the treatment helps. There's a lot more people who they don't find the relief that they were looking for.
Wow, that's too bad. So this is part of the gift that you're going to bring to the world, right, KC? A new form of treatment.
That's my plan.
Awesome. Well, I know, we could say the same thing about talk therapy, right? Any kind of counseling therapy that's just talk. The deal is that it happens at the level of the mind. And that's where the problem started, at the level of the mind. So we could go to some of the ancients, like, Einstein and other people have said, you cannot solve a problem at the level that it was created, which explains then why, psychology, talk therapy does not work for the majority of people.
Exactly.
Right. And so we need to really, this could be a huge revolution that you bring to the world, that, we need to bring the metaphysical, we need to bring these new kinds of, breath work, all this stuff into the healing realm if we're really going to help people instead of just talk.
Exactly. And I think, one thing that really spoke to me about the metaphysical realm of things was, seeing how it didn't work and being frustrated with, okay, why isn't this working? There's got to be something else. There's got to be something more. And that was, what led me down the spiritual path of treating addictions. And I see a lot of people who don't want anything to do with 12-step programs because of the word God and just mental blocks.
Mm-hmm.
That once they realize that it is spiritual, and whatever sort of journey one takes in recovery, it by no means has to be 12-step. It's that spiritual aspect of it that really gets down to then healing at the molecular level and the cellular level, and where it all started.
Well, that's a fascinating thought, right, Patrick, that it started at the cellular level. So with your biology and science, what does that mean?
Well, the way I would look at it is that it isn't so much maybe the physical cells of the body, but looking at the if we look at it as the soul level, because we are spiritual beings, that a lot of times we talk about how everything begins with a thought. And so that thought becomes an idea. That idea eventually may become a belief. And once we have these beliefs about ourselves, they lead to certain things. So our beliefs and our attitudes then form actions. And so there's something behind, whenever somebody's becoming addictive. And even if if you are looking at the cellular level, there's a lot of biology that says there are some genetic markers and things that can lead to addiction. So even at that physical level, then we would still have to ask the question, if I'm a spiritual being, you really have to decide if you believe that. If I'm a spiritual being and I came into this life, and let's say I had choice about where I was born and the kind of family I was born into and things like that. So why would I choose a genetic line that had that kind of predisposition? Maybe it was something where you've had lifetimes where, you had to work on directing your mind. And so having something where if you lost your focus, that, you could easily, move into an addiction or something like that. And obviously we can't cover every possible scenario, because that was just something, one possible scenario that came off the top of my head. But there's all kinds of different reasons why we might set up certain learning experiences, because ultimately there is a benefit there somewhere. There is something that we can gain from it. And we also have to look at the idea that to the soul, even if we go through some temporary suffering or hardship physically, the soul doesn't really consider that a big deal, because ultimately we are energetic beings of light and energy. We are eternal beings. And so we can't really die. Our body dies, all of us in a physical body are going to lose our body at some point. Just like when you go out and you buy a new car, you may love your car and it may look amazing when you drive it off the lot, but eventually you're going to get your first scratch. I mean, we've all been there. You get your first ding, something starts to rust a little bit, something else breaks down. Eventually you're going to get to the point where you're like, okay, it's ready to trade this thing in. So that's just like with our physical body. We go on and on. We work our bodies, we use them, but eventually they get to the point where we're like, okay, I've had enough of this lifetime. I'm ready to move on. And so when we look at that context, that we don't cease to exist, then we can look at it from a higher level, kind of like you were talking about, where you can't address a problem at the level where it exists. Well, if you're applying that directly in terms of the concepts of metaphysics, then you're looking at it that you can't solve the problem physically. You can't look at it just at the physical level. And KC, that when you're talking about bringing in God, or however people think about spirituality, I don't think people have to believe in like a standard Christian philosophy or Muslim philosophy or Jewish philosophy or anything like that, but just some kind of sense of spirituality, that you are a being that exists beyond just this physical body, this physical life. And when you bring your consciousness to that perspective and look back on our physical life and our physical body, then things take on a different perspective. And I think that's really the key. That's that shift. And we don't always know where it's going to lead, but I think, as we listen to it, we follow it, we make observations about the changes in our lives and look at it that way, then over time, amazing things can happen.
Totally. Yeah, it's fascinating. So KC, I've experienced this myself with the breath work. So with the breath work, do you want to just give people, there's so many different concepts about what is breath work. How would you kind of define the type of breath work that you do and what it means to be a breath worker?
So I get asked that question a lot, and people will say, oh yeah, I do yoga, pranayama, or I do breathing meditations, and it's really relaxing. And I say, yeah, well, those are really nice. However, the type of breath work that I do is usually referred to as therapeutic breath work or conscious connected breath work. And the common ground is that you have faster than normal breathing that lasts a specific amount of time and is usually used to clear emotional and energetic blocks in one way or another.
I love that. Yeah. And also, the way I look at it too is that normally we have a pause between the inhale and the exhale, but with the breath work, it's cyclical. In other words, the inhale and the exhale are connected. So there is no pause. And that's what basically revs it up a little bit so that you're breathing faster. And that's the difference between just regular breathing. And typically we learned from Sandra Ray and Leonard Orr, who Leonard recently passed away, an amazing teacher, but they both taught, typically an hour session is enough to get deep and bring out some stuff. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. An hour seems like a long time breathing, and sometimes it can feel like a long time, and sometimes it goes by really, really fast. Regardless of what happens when you get done, you feel like you're in bliss.
Yeah. Kind of orgasmic, like,
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
and people don't get like why people want to keep doing the breath work, but it's one of the reasons is that, and it just feels good physically to get to that. It's almost like a high.
Yeah, yes, it is. Exactly. Exactly. And, I know sometimes it brings up really deep emotions, anger, anxiety, sadness. And one of the beautiful things about breath work is when you're in a supported environment, you're able to feel those emotions and release them so that you're not walking around just stuffing them all day long. And a lot of times people don't even realize that they're stuffing these emotions, and then they lay down to breathe and they just, are angry for no reason, and they let it out. And then the next day they wake up and that neck ache that they've had for years is gone.
Well, I can't say definitely that every breathing experience is orgasmic, but I don't want to oversell people on the idea of what they're going to get. That might be really disappointed when they have a breathwork session. It isn't that good. But I do have to say, most everybody really enjoys the experience. So like you said, sometimes things come up, but usually by the end of the session, we go through this thing. Sometimes we call it the process, like where you kind of almost start going into automatic pilot, and it's almost like the intuitive mind is just kind of leading you through it. And then by the end of the process, though, even though you might have had some discomfort along the way, you always seem to end on a really good note. And so many people that I have done breath work with, just think it's amazing.
Well, and yeah, every breathwork experience is completely different. That's been my experience. I've had some where I'm laughing and full of joy. And then there's other breathwork sessions where, we've pulled up a lot of negative stuff to the surface. And like you said, Casey, we are removing energy blocks. That always doesn't feel good because energy block is painful. And anybody who's worked with me knows I also like to do gateway points. And it can be very painful when I touch a point where it's blocked, but I really feel like it gets the energy and opens the block quicker, even though it's a little bit more intense. And so it's kind of like if you can ride the wave and realize that you're going to bring up the pain and you're going to feel it, but then you have the potential of releasing it, which is way better than stuffing it. Because what happens when we stuff the emotions, like you said, Casey, buried emotions never die. So we think, oh, they're out of sight, out of mind. This is good. I don't feel the pain. What most people don't realize is that it's settling in at the cellular level. Mm-hmm. Over time, that area of the body is going to start to become painful. And eventually, if we don't deal with it, it could manifest as a particular physical sickness or, some kind of growth.
Yes. Very true. Very, very true. And usually one thing that I love about breath work and how it addresses those issues and helps to heal those issues is that we're actually going in and treating the cause. Even though we might not know exactly what the cause is, we're able to treat it by releasing those energy blocks rather than going and getting a, hip replacement or knee replacement or whatever treating the symptoms. We got to get in there and treat the internal cause.
So if somebody has no idea what we're talking about with breath work, can you describe what a typical session might look like from the time that somebody walked in to do maybe, let's say, their first session?
Breathwork. Usually when people come in, we take some time to explain what's going to happen. And the breath work that I do uses really loud music, loud and invigorating music. And so after we've explained what the process is and answered questions, everybody gets comfortable, and we'll do a relaxation bit to start off. And then I've actually learned how I've had several different methods of starting the breath work. So there's usually some sort of formal beginning, and then it just goes into the cyclical deep breathing that sounds like Kathryn said, no stopping at the top or bottom of each breath. Mm-hmm. And you continue doing that for roughly an hour. The type of, usually when I do breath work, people are allowed to kind of have whatever experience they have. So sometimes people will have visions of things. Sometimes I've had people experience past lives, meet spirit animals or spirit guides. Like I said, the difficult emotions sometimes come up. At the Wellness Institute, they use punching bags and kind of use them as, we call them the energy bags, and then we have a hose, and so people can get out that pent up energy by beating the bag with the hose as a way to release the energy and, put it in a safe place, which would be the bag. And so after all of these things come up towards the end of the session, people start to calm down and have that spiritual experience, that more blissful experience of, and then once the music is over, then we come out of the session and have a processing time so that everybody has a chance to share what happened during their experience.
So when you say sometimes you do it in a group and sometimes you do it just private?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I usually do it in a group, other than with you, Kathryn.
Right. I like group breath work. I also like individual sessions depending on what I'm dealing with and so forth. So, but yes, KC is an amazing breath worker. And I was curious, I want to get a little personal here with you. So when you did the breath work, what did you discover in terms of the alcoholism? Like, why were you drawn to it? What did you learn, or what came up? What was the cause?
With the breath work or the alcoholism?
Well, yeah, through the breath work, what did you discover about, the alcoholism and why it happened?
That's actually a really good question. When it comes to the alcoholism, one thing that I have realized through all of my research, both intellectual and on a personal healing level, is that I don't know exactly what the cause was or is. I just know that it's an extreme discomfort being in my body. And so by doing breath work, I've been able to be more comfortable being in my body. It also gives me that when addiction is usually a way to escape your reality. So it gives you it has given me a healthy outlet of being able to release those emotions in a positive, healthy way, and also feel good, have that, that orgasmic experience, again, in a positive way, and feel connected to something greater than myself, as well as feel connected with myself.
Interesting. Wow. Yeah.
Internal self. Yeah.
So having those different experiences that you've had, how would you say that the breath work is different than, say, talk therapy? How is that different for you?
I think the breath work gets right into whatever's bothering me or, whoever's there. It brings up whatever's going on in the moment of one's life, but then it also is able to get deeper to where it started. So the cells holding the energy and the memory of childhood traumas, or even birth traumas, birth issues, womb issues, it goes back to that. So you're able to heal what might take 10 years in talk therapy in 3 or 4 sessions of breath work. Might not mean that you're healed forever and every issue that you've ever had is solved and you'll never have an issue again. However, the results are really pretty similar to 10 years of therapy a lot of times.
Well, and it's because I think a lot of the stuff that's stored in our subconscious mind, we're not aware of. So we could sit there, years and talk therapy, but we're not even getting to the core, because the core of what's going on is in that subconscious that we're not even aware of. But the breath work bypasses that conscious mind and gets us into that subconscious state. And so after the break, Casey, let's pick up and delve in more to the subconscious aspect, because we're going to the bottom of the hour now.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good.
So we are at the bottom of the hour. We're going to be going into a short break. And during the break, you can visit our Spirits Journey page at tfrlive.com. You can also check us out on intuitiveschool.com and see some of the things that we've been up to. TFR is a listener-supported station, and part of your contribution also goes to help us with our continuing journey. This is Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio and Oneness Talk Radio. See you on the other side. We are back from the break. If you are just joining us, this is Spirit's Journey with Patrick and Kathryn Andries, coming to you on Truth Frequency Radio and simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. We are here today with KC Bushnell, and we are talking about breath work. So one of the things that I wanted to lead off with in this second half is that a lot of times we like to refer to it as intuitive breathwork, because I really like the idea that the intuitive mind really kind of steps in there and starts the breath process. And sometimes we even describe that as like the breath starts breathing you. I know people have talked about it in different ways and call it different things. Leonard Orr and Sandra Ray, for example, refer to it as rebirthing, and Sandra Ray then also started calling it liberation breathing. So there's a lot of different ways people refer to it depending on what they're focused on. But the thing that I thought was really fascinating when I started doing it and then doing it with others, and we talked about this in the first half, but there's this point where your attention just goes to whatever needs the most attention. So what I would talk about with people is sometimes, your knee might start hurting. So the energy starts going to that point, and whenever there's a pain, a lot of times it's where there's a blockage, and so the energy is flowing through there trying to open up that blockage, kind of like cleaning a drain pipe or something like that. And so then as you focus the breath in that point, then it would clear up and eventually that channel would open. And I think when you were talking about that, the breath work goes right to the core of the issue, even if you don't consciously know exactly what that is. I think even with those mental and emotional issues that we are faced with, I think it seems to have the same effect. I mean, really, if you look at it, the things in our lives ultimately have some kind of a neural path in the brain. So I think it's going in there and really clearing out those paths and maybe freeing up energy blocks that we have that are in our neural pathways. And the thing is, we may not be able to describe every detail about how it's happening, but when we look at the effects of it, the effects are unmistakable. There is definitely something happening. So would you agree with that, Casey? Have you seen experiences like that?
I would agree with that 110%. And yeah, I think, when you were saying that, I started thinking about one of the issues, I think, we were talking about treating addictions and kind of treatment of body treatment of mental and physical symptoms here in our society is we always want to know why. And the magic and beauty behind breath work and a lot of the ancient healing techniques is maybe we don't know exactly why or how, but we know it works.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes, I get so flabbergasted by it, is like, okay, it works, so let's use this, even though we might not know exactly what happened. It's happening and it's working.
Yeah. Well, and I think part of that is that it's able to get into that subconscious mind and do a little bit of reprogramming, because so many people today, we're living in the age of information overload. People there's any kind of information you want is at the tip of your fingers. But transformation, true transformation goes beyond just taking in knowledge. I mean, I think very few people could transform just from knowledge. But the breath work actually gets in that subconscious mind. I mean, have you experienced this type of reprogramming of the subconscious through the breath work?
I have. It's helped me, to overcome fatigue and depression. I was able to get off one medication completely just by doing breath work. And I gained more confidence, and it shows up in a variety of ways in my life.
Yeah, because I think that is the key. If we can access that subconscious mind, and that's why, I've had these amazing experiences like other people where you actually go back to past lives. And the only way you're going to delve into past lives is going into the subconscious where all those past lives are stored.
Yes.
And sometimes, the root, or, we've been talking a lot about, well, how did it get started? We don't consciously know a lot of times how the problem started. So maybe the alcoholism that you suffered, maybe other problems that we have stem from a past life scenario. And by going back to that past life through the breath work, we revisit it and we can just somehow release it.
Yes. Yeah. I've heard that just, by experiencing that and going through, it's almost like you kind of go through whatever you weren't able to go through in that past life, or even in this life. And when you were a little kid, when I was a little kid and they weren't able to say what we wanted to say or do what we wanted to do, we're able to we kind of relive it in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And have that corrective healing experience.
Yeah. And I think maybe for you, I'm thinking, with the drinking, it was an escape, and you found that you could escape in a different way through the breath work. Not that we're escaping, but we are going back to our true nature, which is the soul, the subconscious. And that, I think, is what we all are really craving to some extent.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And and I think another part of it is when I was drinking, I wanted to repress everything. I didn't want to feel anything. And so the breath work has been able to give me an outlet to actually feel my feelings, feel those emotions, and let them out so that I don't need something to numb myself out with. I'm not looking for that.
That's really profound. It's kind of like, works in my mind a little like homeopathy, where, homeopathy is the opposite of allopathy. Allopathy says, let's repress the symptoms. Homeopathy says, no, the remedies are going to bring the symptoms up, because the only way you can really heal something is through bringing them up and releasing them. And that's kind of how I look at breath work. And that's why sometimes, one breath work session, is not going to transform your life. A lot of times we say when that 10 sessions for a beginner is a good amount to really get some traction going. I don't know what your experience is with people saying, well, how many sessions do I need?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad that you brought that up. In my training, they've never actually talked about how many sessions. And so I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I think it's important for people to understand that it's not just to come in once and have even if you have a profound experience, that now you're healed forever. I think the consistency is is essential to having the lasting effects.
Mm-hmm. And also the idea that we're like an onion, and so we peel away the layers. So yeah, your first session just could be this awesome blissfulness, but there's layers to get through. And so it doesn't mean that you're digressing if your next session, like you pull up all this goopy stuff from the past, because I've had that experience. It's just that, oh, it's just a different level that was under this level. And it's not that it's, any worse. It just all needs to be cleared eventually.
Yep. I was just thinking of the onion and the layers. I like to call it the magic onion because it's never ending.
Right.
I believe, until we're, born as one of those yogis that can just really transcend time and space. That onion's magic, and it's going to keep peeling and peeling and peeling.
Right. Well, I believe the 10 actually came from Leonard Orr. He's considered the father of rebirthing in this country. And so he used to talk about that you needed to do at least 10 sessions before you would even consider starting to coach somebody else as they're getting started on their rebirthing practice. And so I think that's kind of a good rule of thumb, though. It gives you enough experience where you have kind of a good foundation. And so what I usually would tell my clients is that I would recommend at least 10 sessions with a coach before you would ever start trying to do it on your own at home, because people want to start trying it on their own and things like that. But I think it's always valuable to have a coach by your side, because it's easy to get off track, and the coach is always there to monitor your progress, and it gives you somebody to bounce experiences off. One of the things when you were talking about past lives, I haven't specifically had a past life experience when I was doing intuitive breathing, but I remember when I first got started in it that my spirit guide came to me. And that's not something that I talk about a lot, but I have had some experiences along the way with my spirit guide. So I definitely know I have a guide who's working with me in this life and kind of helping me out as I go along. And so she came to me and she was helping me align my spine and working with me, kind of helping to align and tune up my chakras, and kind of helping me to I guess the way I could best describe it is kind of like tune up my energy channels so that I could start experiencing higher levels of energy, and not energy like bouncing off the walls energy, but just more like heightened states of consciousness and awareness. And so that's, there's a lot of different ways. We were talking about how everybody's experiences are going to be different. When I was working with clients, I had some people that they felt like they were having to work so hard to just breathe. And other people were just going in and having these blissful experiences. And all I can say is that I really observed that where they were in their consciousness, I think, had a lot to do with their experiences. So if somebody's more spiritually minded and thinking about that on a regular basis, and they're coming into the session with more of a spiritual intention, then they would typically have a more spiritual experience. But if somebody kind of looks at their life as just, I'm a physical body kind of trudging through this physical experience, and I don't really know what more there is and things like that, they would tend to have those more kind of physical experiences, which could in the beginning sometimes be difficult. So it's just kind of interesting, but the thing that is fascinating is just how that intuitive mind just gets in there and kind of takes you right where you need to go.
Yes, I agree. I'm one of those people that have had a lot of very difficult breath work sessions, just a difficulty letting go and surrendering in the beginning. And sometimes when I look back, I think, gosh, why am I so enthusiastic about breath work? Because at first it was really hard. It was work,
Mm-hmm.
But I always felt so amazing at the end that I just kept showing up. And it's been truly life-changing for me.
Now, this was an experience I had with clients. I wanted to ask you about if you've experienced anything like this. And Leonard Orr came to our school in Chicago, and was doing a workshop and a series of events there. And one of the things that he talked about, which I hadn't heard before, is he said the breath work will bring out chemicals and toxins and stuff in your body that have been there. And one of the examples that he gave was anesthesia. And I thought, anesthesia, that's a gas. Surely that would not stay in your body. He said, oh, yeah, it could be in your body for years. And he said, when you smell this kind of medicinal sort of smell, like, well, how it smells in a hospital. You smell the medications and the antiseptics and all of that just kind of blended together with this kind of medicinal odor that's coming off the person as they're breathing. He said, check with them, because it's likely that at some point they've gone under surgery where they had a general anesthesia. So if you think about it, if you have a 1 or 2 hour surgery, they have that gas, and it's just, going through you that whole time, keeping you under. And so it's just really permeating all those cells in your lungs, and your body doesn't really release it quite as readily as what we're being led to believe, or what people think. If you ask your doctor, I'm sure he's going to, oh yeah, in 2 days it'll be completely out of your system. But I was working with a client, and sure enough, it was unmistakable. It was a very strong odor that was coming off, and it was medicinal kind of smelling, like an antiseptic or a gas, like, if you ever had gas at the dentist's office or something like that. So when we got done, that was one of the things I followed up, just out of curiosity, just seeing, because he had just shared that with me. And I was amazed, because she had a surgery and she was under a general anesthetic, but it had been like 10 years ago, and so this breath work was like bringing that out after all this time that had been just trapped there latent in her lungs. It can't be good for it just sitting there. So with some of your experiences, like, have you personally experienced anything like that, of it bringing up these amazing cleansing experiences, or with your clients?
I haven't had that specific type of experience myself or with anybody that I've worked with. However, the last time I was in Seattle for my training at the Wellness Institute, there were several people who had experiences like that. And one of the things that they pointed that thought that came from was the anesthetic from birth. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so we did a lot of work on that, and it was really amazing hearing about feeling that releasing. And somebody did say that they felt something.
Well, yeah, because Leonard Orr calls it rebirthing, because he originally was able to release birth trauma through the breath work. I guess, he had issues where the cord was wrapped around his neck and so forth. So that would make sense that, yeah, you could still be releasing that from birth. And, I know my first session with rebirthing, I just could not stop laughing. And I think it was anesthesia coming. I felt like I was under laughing gas, and it was like, wow, people were like, she's having a really good experience. And I was, but even though that one was positive, other ones, I want to talk about this idea of resistance to doing the breathwork sessions, because I've experienced where I was like, oh my God, dreading doing it, scared, like, oh my God, I don't want to do it. I thought, what is going on? Like, I love breath work. And so what I learned was that it was the ego that didn't want to do the breath work, because the ego wants to be in control. And when you do the breath work, you are not under control of the ego. You get into the true self, subconscious mind, and you release a lot of things that the ego doesn't want you to release. And so when somebody resists it, you just got to push through it, and do it, I guess, is the only thing I can say.
Yeah, I agree. And I like, there's the whole idea of surrendering, which is so hard for the ego. Oh my gosh. And also even looking at it as, how is this like my life? I'm resisting. What other areas am I resisting? And am I going to give in to the ego, or am I going to push through? And I believe that every breathwork experience is a chance to reprogram the brain in many ways, whether it's pushing through or giving, or the giving in when our ego doesn't want us to do the breath work session.
Yeah, and like you said, oh, breathing's supposed to be easy. I do it every day. But doing, people think, and I felt like, but sometimes it feels like work. Like, oh my gosh, I cannot take another breath. And I think again, that is the ego wanting to resist the opening up. I mean, if
Yeah,
it's
and I'll
crazy.
say that probably my most powerful sessions, although there wasn't necessarily something that happened during the session, but afterwards were the sessions that started off where I'm going, oh my God, how much longer, kind of peeking, looking at the clock. I usually have an eye mask on, but wanting to peek. Um, and then it's like, then when it's over, oh, wow, that was definitely worth it. And, they say the tougher the journey, or the tougher the journey, the greater the glory, greater the challenge, greater the
Something like
glory.
that. Yeah.
You know, and, um, yeah, I think breath work is just a really great tool just to enhance whatever's going on in one's life. It's a good way to bring the macrocosm of your life into this microcosm of a session, a few hours that you can really transcend a lot of stuff.
One of the ways that I've seen resistance happens too, I've seen this in myself and some of the clients that I've worked with over the years, is in when you're falling asleep. I think that's like this, maybe
Are you talking
this.
about me?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we've had a few experiences of that too. So I think it's a pattern of avoidance. It's maybe there's some kind of an emotional energy or issue or a thought, a belief about yourself, or maybe even a past experience, because sometimes you might bring up past experiences that are relevant to your learning of what's going on right now, and you're just kind of checking out. You don't want to have to deal with it, so you just fade away and you have a hard time staying awake. And I've had some sessions that were like that, like Kathryn was talking about having a hard breathing. I had some sessions where it was just hard to stay awake. I just kept wanting to drift off and drift off. Then I've had clients too, it's like I was, just always working to wake them up every 5 minutes or so. And that's why, like I said, it's good to work with a coach, because if you are drifting off, you have somebody there to bring you back. You have somebody there to, try different methods, because there's a lot of different techniques that you can use to help keep somebody on track and just keep them working. Because again, it's like every breath you take, every minute that you stay with it, you're going to get that benefit, instead of just saying, oh yeah, I'm just going to, check out. Or if it's getting too difficult, maybe that's a sign I shouldn't be doing it. But sometimes it's more like, well, if you just stick with it, it's kind of like exercise. If you stick with it when it's getting uncomfortable, then that's when you might have a breakthrough.
Yeah.
And it's not like there's anything there that's going on that's going to hurt you, but it's, bringing that out into the awareness, go to the point where you can have that breakthrough. And then, it's like you're in a completely different place when you finish.
Yes. Yeah, I agree completely. And yeah, and even when you're talking about falling asleep and having that coach there, I think it's always important, even if I do a group session, that the number of people are limited to, 4 to 7 people at the most, if it's just me. Otherwise, it's really easy for people to drift off. And a lot of times I've done breath work where we have sitters. So one person breathes and one person just sits there to make sure the other person doesn't fall asleep.
Right. Which hopefully people listening are getting the importance of having a breathwork coach and not to go try this on your own, at least for the first 10 sessions.
Yes.
And so, KC, you do these amazing retreats where you combine the breath work with some of your other modalities. You do hypnotherapy and things. So for KC Peeps, she does these retreats at the Light Center. So could you kind of describe, if anybody really wants to get some intensive breath work, what they're like?
What the retreats are like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the retreats, I call them personal power retreats. And they're really based on getting in touch with the power that's inside of you, our inner power, not on an egoic level, but on more of an intuitive, self-loving level, and connecting with spirit and connecting with nature in a spiritual way. And so they're held at the Light Center, like you said. What we do they start on a Friday night, and we do I call them self-discovery journeys. And so you go out on your own, and weather permitting, they're usually through the woods, and there's little stations set up with different exercises. We always start off with beginning the weekend by releasing what no longer serves our highest good. And then the rest of the journey is a surprise to everyone. So I don't like to give away too many of the stations, but sometimes it's just, sitting and meditating for 5 minutes. There'll be instructions, sit down and meditate on the smells. And so you go through the different stations and then come back. And the Light Center has a barn. It's a 125-year-old remodeled barn. And so that's where all of the retreats are held. So we get back to the barn and bond that night, usually around a bonfire, again, weather permitting. And then on Saturday, we do breath work during the day, start off with yoga in the morning, and then have a little bit of breakfast. And then we'll have a meditation and sharing, and then breath work, usually in the afternoon. But one of the things about the retreats is that it's very organic. So the schedule changes a lot, which really drives some people crazy, which I think is healing for them to have that insight, and other people really love. And then we usually have some sort of spiritual ceremony Saturday night. I try to have a sweat lodge at least once a year during one of the retreats. I do 2 a year, usually one spring, summer, late spring, early summer, and then one in the fall, October, November. And then Sunday morning is for integration. We get up and we have coffee and breakfast, and usually have a fire that morning and sit around and talk. And then we complete the weekend by going on the journey that we started the weekend off, that we did alone. We go on that journey together as a group.
How would somebody get a hold of you if they're interested in being part of one of these retreats? That sounds really awesome. I think I'm interested.
I know, I'm vicariously already there in front of the fire, Casey.
Yeah. So my website is healingpilateslawrence.com. And then I also have a Facebook page, which it's under Personal Power, Pilates, and Wholeness is the Facebook page. You can also go to the Light Center. Their website is lightcenter.info.
All right. Well, KC, that's all the time we have. It's amazing. This show's flown by, but thank you so much for coming on our show.
Love you, KC. Thanks for coming.
Yes.
I learned a lot.
Thank you so much for having me very much. This was lots of fun.
So we love having you all with us. So please stay in contact with us on our Facebook page at Spirits Journey Radio. Be sure to like our page so that we can remain part of your life. And you can study with us at intuitiveschool.com. This has been Spirits Journey on Truth Frequency Radio, simulcast on Oneness Talk Radio. I'm Patrick.
And I'm Kathryn. Have a great week.
Goodbye for now.